first of two Kingfishers on the northern slope targeted Hohiro's Daishi. The heavy autocannon that made up the Kingfisher's right forearm spat fire and shells that hit the Daishi in the center of its torso, shredding a third of its protection there. Spent shells rained out of the ejection port of the weapon, dropping steaming to the ground. Hohiro wrestled with his mech's controls, struggling to ride out the hideous impact of the Kingfisher's assault. The large and medium lasers built into the Kingfisher's left arm raked their beams across the Daishi. The green beam further stripped armor from the mech's chest, while the red beam obliterated the combined crest on the Daishi's right thigh. Another scarlet laser splashed out from the Kingfisher's right flank and boiled armor scales off the Omnimech's right arm. Prince of Havoc, page 63, by Michael A. Stackpole. The early days of Omnimech development within the clans were wild and woolly. As with any new technology, sometimes those early attempts at implementation can be rough, and many lack the bells and whistles of later models. Still, those early mechs were important, and they walked in order to help the later Omnimechs run. Among the second generation of Omnimechs that would hit the scene in a flurry of development following the trials which snatched the technology from Clan Coyote, a few battlemechs stood out among the others and showed such quality and utility that their production continued even when newer mechs were developed. Classics such as the Nova and Summoner were there, but also a few more specialized favorites like the Battle Cobra and the Firemoth as well. Of all of them, the Kingfisher, a 90-ton assault Omnimech, stands as a frequently forgotten entry into the pantheon. The Kingfisher was a product of Clan Snow Raven, who was just dipping their toes into the water with Omnimech production. The Ravens were seeking out a replacement to the Pulverizer, which was a standard 90-ton mech, which the clan had seized from Clan Wolverine following that clan's eradication. While functional and quite capable, the Pulverizer was plagued by its association with the now not mentioned clan, and it ended up being a continual issue for the Snow Ravens. Taking what they already knew about building a solid mech and meshing in the lessons picked up by the earliest Omnimechs, the Ravens sought to set the standard for what an assault Omnimech could be. The weight was set at 90 tons, and the Kingfisher was predictably built around an SLYTA endosteel frame, but somewhat surprisingly, a Star League standard 360 fusion engine. While the 460 movement profile wasn't odd, the engine itself was. At a time when the newest and greatest Omnimechs were all given the latest and greatest in technology, the standard fusion engine of the Kingfisher seemed quite quaint. After working with all these mechs over the past few years, many of them have a tendency to blend together in what was left of my middle-aged gray matter. I'd honestly forgotten about this aspect of the Kingfisher until the research for this video began. It was fun to dive into the various official configurations and look at them through the lens of creating a 90-ton zombie mech that could be theoretically very dangerous even after suffering catastrophic damage. I think we should keep this in mind as we look at this Omnimech's standard configurations. Missile, PPC, and laser fire speared from the Woodsman, Kingfisher, and Summoners comprising her two lash stars. Most of the targeted Smoke Jaguar mechs suffered damage, one Hellbringer succumbing to catastrophic leg damage and tumbling to the ground where it lay smoking and inert. The Smoke Jaguars, roused by the arrival of the main force of their opponents in this trial, responded in typical Smoke Jaguar fashion, by attacking. The return fire was intense but disciplined, honoring the rules of Zellbriggen. Many Snow Raven machines suffered hits, but luckily none were felled. Scavenger's Blood, Shrapnel, Year 1, page 286 to 287, by Alan Brundage. The Kingfisher's 14.5 tons of Z5 ferrofibrous armor provided 278 points of protection, which was just a half-ton short of the max possible on a 90-ton mech. Between the endosteel and the ferrofibrous, a considerable amount of mass was made up from not going with the XL engine. The downside was a considerable investment in internal critical locations. Opportunity cost spares no one, not even the Kingfisher. Now, update. Now that the script is done and I'm recording this audio, I do want to note that running out of critical locations is rarely an issue with this machine. It may require a little bit of Tetris to get in what you want, but at no point in my tinkering did I have too few criticals. It was always a mass issue in the end. With 7 tons devoted to cockpit and gyro and 17 double heat sinks, that left 24 tons of pod space for weaponry and equipment in 27 critical locations. The only question left was how to spend it. This is turning into a math problem. Let's see how the Ravens decided to sort it out. The primary configuration was built around a pair of large pulse lasers, one placed into the right arm and the other in the center torso. Off to a decent start. Backing them up in the left torso was a standard long-range missile 10 rack fed by 1 ton of ammunition in the same case-protected torso. At the mid and short ranges, a pair of medium pulse lasers could be added to the light show for another possible 14 damage together. A Streak SRM-6 along with 1 ton of ammunition was placed into the left arm, along with an emotional support ER small laser. Overall, the primary config is perfectly serviceable. It's also fair to point out that for a 90-ton clan mech, it lacks a little bit of oomph. I think this is where we need to pause and remember that durability matters here. Taking off the entire right side of the battle mech leaves the Kingfisher with 1 large pulse laser, 1 medium pulse laser, the LRM-10, Streak SRM-6, and the ER small laser. That's still a considerable amount of punch. Going the other direction, taking off the left side, you have 2 large pulse lasers and a medium pulse laser. Also, not too shabby. What the primary configuration really highlights, largely due to that large pulse laser in the center torso, is that barring any odd head hits or lucky leg clipping, the Kingfisher is a battle mech that can do fairly decent amount of damage for a very long time. Luckily, much longer than most of its XL engine packing peers. Let's see if the other configurations lead into this for similar effect. The Kingfisher A configuration carried an LB-10X autocannon in the right arm along with 2 tons of ammunition in the right torso. Also in that right torso, an ER small laser sits pretty. Following the trend of the primary, it placed another powerful weapon in the center torso, in this case an ER PPC. So far, the design theory is holding. But what's on the left side of the mech to balance out that LB-10X and ER small laser? In the left arm, an ER medium laser and a medium pulse laser offer solid damage, and the addition of a short-range missile 6-pack in the left torso offers a considerable punch as well. So once again, the Kingfisher is a split build that harbors a powerful weapon in that center torso. Between the two, I'm less of a fan of the A configuration, largely because of the one of everything plague, which can make actual use a bit of a chore. Either going with 2 medium pulse lasers in that left arm or 2 ER mediums would go a long way in making the A configuration feel less of a mess. To her left, she saw Netta's Kingfisher cut loose with a barrage from its particle projection cannon at the Wolf mech that was attempting to charge through the wall of fire to break out against the Ghost Bears. The Wolf, a linebacker, reached the edge of the burning area just in time to get hit by Netta's PPC fire, which ripped into its right weapons pod. It turned slowly, but did not bring its weapons online. Roar of Honor, page 185, by Blaine Lee Pardoe. Deployment of the Kingfisher was widespread. By the point that Operation Revival got going, the battle mech could be found among the tumens of most of the existing clans. And though it was spotted among the forces of the Ghost Bears and Smoke Jaguars on Tukayyid, the Kingfisher didn't get one of those sweet TC variants. What a shame. The Kingfisher Configuration B takes off a little bit on its own with the installation of an Ultra AC-20 autocannon into the right arm. It's offset by an ER large laser in the left arm and a collection of 4 ER medium lasers spread across the left arm, left torso, and right torso. The UAC-20 is fed by just 2 tons of ammunition in the right torso, which made the Config B a build unlikely to do well far from resupply. An ER small laser was also added to the left arm because we all need a little laser from time to time. Finally, in those much coveted center torso critical locations, an anti-missile system along with 1 ton of ammunition were added. While the fun of an Ultra AC-20 is undeniable, its ammunition supply is a serious concern with the Kingfisher B configuration. For a battle mech that is constructed to outlast its opponents over the course of a battle, it feels contradictory to give it a weapon that can be exhausted quickly. It's for this reason that I cannot recommend the B configuration in all but the most niche of circumstances where you have the ammunition nearby. Going in the other direction, the Kingfisher C configuration was designed exclusively with energy weaponry. 2 ER PPCs dominate the build and offered a 1-2 punch split between the left and right arms. Backing them up in the mid and short ranges were 4 ER medium lasers, 2 placed into the center torso and 2 more split between the left and right. The only items in the side torsos were 5 double heat sinks with 4 more pod mounted doubles in the arms. That brought the total to 25 on the C config. Total heat output of an Alpha Strike on the run ended up at +2 into the red, so heat definitely wasn't an issue on this machine. The consistent hard-hitting damage of the twin ERBPCs was nice, though it does make one wonder about the value added here because there are plenty of clan heavy mechs that can sport a pair of ERBPCs. In this case, only the durability of the Kingfisher's armor and the lack of that XL engine are its saving grace. The last of the official configurations was the Config D, and it's an interesting one. Best described as a long-range sniper config, the Kingfisher D was given 3 ER large lasers, 2 in the left arm and 1 in the center torso. They're aided by the installation of an Ultra AC-10 autocannon in the right arm, but it's clear that the lasers were the star of the show. Able to consistently fire all 3 out to extremely long range turned the Kingfisher D into a long-range skirmisher. How successful that plan is will depend upon how that mech is supported, as that 460 movement doesn't let the assault mech fall back very easily under pressure. Firing the 3 ER large lasers while on the run nets the mech +4 into the red, which will require laying off one of the lasers later on in a subsequent turn, lest the mech slow even more. The Kingfisher D strikes me as one of those OmniMech builds that is perfectly functional in a situation where you absolutely needed it to fill a role where it wasn't well tailored. Yes, it's functional, and yes, it would do quite a bit of work for you, however, there are more preferable options out there. The other Kingfisher on the north slope attacked the second Nodachi. Twin bolts of artificial lightning ripped jagged lines through the armor of the combined mech's right leg and left arm. Ruby beams from the mech's arms slashed at the Nodachi's face and left breast, stripping away much of the armor shielding the pilot. The last 2 medium lasers, built into the center of the Kingfisher's torso, slashed out and melted armor from the Nodachi's chest and right flank. Prince of Havoc, page 64, by Michael A. Stackpole. The next official configuration wouldn't show up until 3061, which is a surprisingly long wait, but we'll just go with it. The Kingfisher H carries 26 double heatsinks in aid of its primary weapons, 2 large heavy lasers. A targeting computer installed into the left arm improved their aim. The possible 16 damage per laser offers a terrifying threat out to 15 hexes, but at the equally terrifying cost of 18 produced heat for the firing mech. At mid and short ranges, 4 ER medium lasers back up the 2 heavies, 2 placed into the center torso, 1 in the right arm and the other in the left torso. A full Alpha Strike on the run would leave the mech at +6 into the red, which is actually not that bad considering the 36 heat generated by firing just the 2 heavy large lasers. While not normally a huge fan of heavy lasers, this setup on the Kingfisher does seem to work. The 16 damage hits with the aid of the targeting computer could be tough to face for long, and it's a likelihood considering how long the Kingfisher can stand up to return fire. To sum this one up, I give the Kingfisher H 3 extremely warm beanie frogs. Just 2 years later, in 3063, the Kingfisher E configuration served as the first in the mech's history to officially employ the famed advanced tactical missile system created by Clan Coyote scientists. The massive ATM-12 launcher installed into the E config's left arm dominates the build, and it's fed by 3 tons of ammunition. That's still only 15 shots though, so don't get too excited. Backing up the missile launcher was a large pulse laser in the right arm and 4 medium pulse lasers spread across the torsos, 2 taking up those valuable center torso locations. The 17 standard double heatsink still did a decent job of keeping the mech cool, as a full Alpha Strike on the run only resulted in a +2 into the red. The E-config's biggest challenge is the lack of ammunition for that ATM launcher. If split evenly, that's just 5 shots per type, which could be enough for a typical battle, but for longer engagements it could force the mechwearer's hand into changing up its distance on target. Of course, one could load up on one type or another, but it would limit options on the day. Overall, I'm pretty lukewarm on the E configuration. If you want to try out the ATM launcher for the first time and don't want to worry about much else, the Kingfisher E is a fair option. Then you can laugh when the dice gods join your side and all 12 high explosive rounds obliterate your target in a single turn. In 3069, the Kingfisher F configuration took advantage of the hefty Hyper Assault Gauss 30 rifle in the left arm, which could fire 30 cluster damage out to 24 hexes. Joining it at long range was an ER large laser in the center torso, which is once again a good spot for such things on this mech. 3 ER medium lasers in the right arm provided good supporting fire in the mid and short ranges. Finally, there was just enough mass remaining for an ECM suite, making the F configuration our first official Operation Sneaky Sneak Kingfisher. Good on you, buddy. The Hag-30 was fed by just 3 tons of ammunition in the left torso, which leaves just 12 shots before requiring resupply. It is unfortunate that the E-config fits with several of the previous variants, which suffer from skimpy ammunition stocks. In concept, the Kingfisher F is okay, but in execution, it's a pass. If the Hag-30 was a 20 instead, it could be salvaged with another heavy-hitting weapon. Oh well. Leaping ahead in 3076, the Kingfisher X configuration once again saw the ERPPC added to the coveted center torso critical locations. Joining it at long range, an LRM-15 aided by an Artemis V fire control system was placed into the right arm. At the mid and short ranges, 3 medium improved heavy lasers sit pretty in the left arm, and 2 ER medium pulse lasers were split between the left and right torsos. All of the lasers were supported by the installation of a targeting computer in the left torso. Finally, an ECM suite was installed into the right torso. Nice try, Configuration X, but the F config beat you to it. Take that weak game outside. The more accurate ERPPC and the other weaponry was nice, but overall the Configuration X strikes me like a wet noodle. This is a build one might expect on a mech 20 tons lighter. Taking a hop, skip, and leap down the timeline to 3136, the Kingfisher G configuration shows off the platform's first official speed boost thanks to a supercharger installed into the center torso. This could push the Kingfisher to a swift 4-8 movement profile briefly, which is not half bad for a 90-tonner. The configuration's primary weaponry was an LB-20X autocannon in the right arm fed by 2 tons of ammunition in the right torso. The rest of the loadout was set for close-range combat. The SRM-6 rack in the left hand offered a nice punch, as well as the 3 medium improved heavy lasers split between the left and right torsos. Finally, a pair of ER small lasers split between the center torso and left arm rounded out the configuration. Without any long-range weaponry, it's clear the Kingfisher G configuration was intended to close in on its targets quickly using the supercharger in order to deliver its loadout at close range on the target. How successful that plan would be would depend upon the battlefield circumstances and how sneaky your Mechwarrior can be. Heat isn't an issue, but having just 10 shots with that LB-20X sure is. Make those shots count. Before we get to the next to the last official configuration, it's important to note that even at the dawn of the O-Clan era, production of the Kingfisher has continued. Officially, Clan Snow Raven, now the Raven Alliance, is producing the mech at their industrial site on Dante, which is roughly 30 light years inside their border with the Draconis Combine. The Kingfisher has been able to keep up with new technology, and the Ravens often run them in stars with newer mechs like the Deimos and Omen. In border clashes with the Federated Suns, the Ravens have strongly asserted their claims to systems like Inner End in 3144. Sure, that meant booting out the House Davion garrison units that had been there for hundreds of years, but let's not get bogged down in the minutiae of who was where first. Though technically the Outworlds Alliance was there first, just 600 years ago. Even among the other surviving clans, the Kingfisher has made its appearances. You might have forgotten it, but it hasn't forgotten you. Yes, you, specifically you. It sees you. The Kingfisher sees all. Where was I? Yes, the Kingfisher I configuration finally gets around to adding a Gauss rifle to the platform in 3137. Better late than never, I suppose. It took up a big chunk of the right arm and was fed by 2 tons of ammunition. In the left arm, twin large improved heavy lasers sit looking like they're warm even when they haven't fired yet. Able to hit out to 15 hexes for 16 damage, the lasers in combination with the Gauss rifle promise a 15-16-16 damage combo, which could be completely devastating for a target, especially when you consider that any of the 3 shots could get lucky and take out a cockpit. The I configuration's 19 double heat sinks are more than enough to keep the mech running and gunning with all 3 weapons, so there's very little chance of waiting this mech out. An opponent's best chances lay in achieving a critical hit on one of the weapons, which would blow off the connecting arm. Still, with OmniMech case in the arms, that only partially deals with the problem. I'm not sure there's an easy way to face down the Kingfisher I configuration beyond keeping your distance and trying to do more damage than you take from that Gauss rifle. The Kingfisher spat a flurry of ruby darts from its pulse lasers, runneling the last of David's armor to the ground and digging deep into his left side. The destructive energy fused together the barrels of his particle projection cannon and laser and then cut deeper to destroy their focusing lenses as well. David came back with everything left to him, knowing he could not stand up under another barrage like that one. His Gauss rifles delivered his last 2 nickel-ferrous slugs into the Kingfisher's chest. He knew it wasn't enough. Flashpoint, page 235 to 236, by Lauren L. Coleman. Our last official configuration for the Kingfisher is the Configuration T, and it arrived on the scene in 3142. It featured a large improved heavy laser in the right arm and a bevy of smaller energy weapons, all aided by the inclusion of a targeting computer located in the right torso. The only long-range weapon in the configuration was a Streak long-range missile 10 launcher in the left torso, fed by 1 ton of Case 2 protected ammunition. 4 ER medium lasers were split between the left, right, and center torsos, with the last on the left arm. The classic Streak short-range missile 6-pack found its way into the left arm for this configuration, and it too had Case 2 protection for its 1 ton of ammunition in the arm. Finally, most powerful and fearsome of them all, an emotional support improved heavy small laser was placed into the right arm to keep infantry and battle armor at an appropriate cooking temperature of 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit. With 19 double heat sinks, the Configuration T was a warm cookie. The 18 heat of the large improved heavy laser eats up a good chunk of the mech's cooling capacity, and the 4 ER medium lasers eat up much of the rest. While it's true the Streak missile launchers can be a sometimes heat expense, this is definitely a design which will require some savvy heat management to maximize damage output while not shuffling the mortal coil. Now, of course, we can't wrap up without feeding my insatiable need for attention with a mech frog configuration. Reminder, this is a totally non-canon thing, and I'm not suggesting otherwise, so please don't yell at me. As a former middle school teacher, I no longer have human emotions, so your angry comments won't make a dent. Behold the Kingfisher MF, in all of its meat and potatoes glory. More seriously, the goal for this configuration was to maximize the damage while also utilizing the mech's durability with a good spread of weapons across the torso, especially those 2 center torso critical locations. The MF's primary weapon is an ER-PPC placed into the right arm. Nothing too outrageous so far, right? Balancing it out on the left arm were a pair of LRM-15s fed by 3 tons of Case 2 protected ammunition in the left torso. While not perfectly matching the damage output of the ER-PPC, it's close, and those LRMs have a tendency to chase after crits in armor wrenched open by PPC blasts. Joining the fun at just slightly shorter range is a large pulse laser placed into the center torso, where it can make itself everyone else's problem for as long as the battle mech can hold out. In order to make sure that last stand is as long as possible, my last addition was an anti-missile system in the right torso fed by a single ton of ammunition in a Case 2 protected left side. Overall, I think the Kingfisher MF configuration is a no-fuss, no-muss loadout that really takes advantage of the mech's strengths while being still a potent threat on the battlefield. It may not have the fancy bells and whistles like targeting computers and superchargers, but it will put points on the board while being a pain to bring down. What more could you ask for from a 90-ton mech? So, Kingfisher. What is there to say about this mech beyond I'm really sorry I forgot you existed, and I've learned my lesson. So often in these videos, the research and analysis helps me better understand the mech, and in most cases I leave with a greater appreciation for it. With the Kingfisher, that effect was intense, and it's so easy to overlook this design among the clan assault mech pantheon. If you haven't already, I'd thoroughly recommend the Kingfisher. It has some solid and fun configurations, and is a no-nonsense testbed for your own creative loadouts as well. If you do give it a try, please come back and let me know how it goes. Do you have a Kingfisher story of glory or woe? Is there a configuration that you feel beats out all the others? Let me know in the comments below and we'll keep this conversation going. Thank you as always for coming out today as we talked about the Kingfisher and all of its glory. If you haven't already, hitting that like and subscribe button will make sure that the YouTube algorithm is happy, and as a result, you'll be much more likely to see my nonsense in the future. Going that extra step and becoming a channel member or supporting on Ko-fi will go a long way to make sure I can keep this venture going. I really appreciate it and the opportunity to do my part to support the BattleTech community. With that, I'll say have a great week. Please keep being positive and go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.